to the Fantasy Footballers Podcast with your hosts, Andy Holloway, Jason Moore, and Mike Wright.
Good morning, world of listeners. It is Thursday, February 25th. Welcome to the show. We're a man down today, but it's still going to be a great show.
It's still going to be a great show.
It's still going to be a great show. We had planned, I'll just say this off the bat, but don't, turn off the episode or anything. Although you already downloaded it, so,
What does it really matter?
We were planning a really fun game show style episode. We dug up about 20 really incredible stats from last year that are insights into individual players, and we're going to do kind of a quiz show type of thing, Mike versus Jason.
I can't wait to see the questions. I've heard they're excellent.
Well, because we hid them from you.
Yeah.
Myself and our research assistant helped us out with that, Alex. And so we will bring you that on Tuesday next week. So that is a teaser for Tuesday next week. The reason we're not doing it now is because Mike is not here. The fantasy hitman has taken out.
He's been assassinated.
Well, he's okay. But I don't know if you saw this. The flu is kind of going around the United States, and Arizona is apparently the biggest flu state, and his wife is down, and he's being a chivalrous father. And
we are nothing if not family men here at the Fantasy Footballers.
So we have given him the day to stay home and take care of her, and we wish her well. And we move on here. We've got a great show. I've got a good quick question for you, Jason, and then we have some dynasty and keeper questions that we're answering, some things that I'm excited to talk about, and it'll be a really, really good show. We got the Combine pretty much starting tomorrow. We got free agency coming up on the 7th, 7th through the 9th areas where that starts, and then NFL drafts in April here. And so we are the Fantasy Footballers, Jason Moore and Andy Holloway here. And you can find us on Twitter at the FF Ballers. If you want to follow us individually, I'm at Andy Holloway, Jason's at JasonFFL, and Mike is at FF Hitman. You can find us on the web, thefantasyfootballers.com. We are on the Fantasy Sports Network. We're also on YouTube, and you can stay tuned for the show after the show. We're
going to get into it on the show after the show.
We'll just tell you right now, we're going to be debating with fervor the merits of an Antonio Brown number 1 pick. I think it's going to be part of the show after the show.
And if you're listening right now and you're thinking Antonio Brown number 1, that's crazy, or Antonio Brown number 1, yes, either way, you must see the debate.
Yes. So quick question for the day is this. I don't know, did you look at this in the doc? Okay, good.
Just pulled it
up. Which team led the league last year in first downs per game? Do you know that?
I do not know that.
Do you have a guess? Do you want to take a shot in the dark? NFC team. I'll give you that.
I was
going
NFC, Patriots.
Well, there you go. So I helped you out.
NFC team.
An NFC team led the league in first downs per game. No idea?
The Giants?
No.
The Saints?
The Saints.
All right.
So you got it with your second guess. Not bad. So Drew Brees was also second in the league in total completions. The team was first in first downs. So the question is really about Drew Brees because people fading on him in the fantasy community, and then part of that is weapons. You got an aging Marcus Colston. You had a Brandon Cooks that he came on. I mean, Cooks was great.
Yep. But you had a Jimmy Graham gone.
Sure, Jimmy left, and so people were fearful. Ingram got hurt. Cooks took a while to come around. So I guess take the temperature of the Drew Brees fantasy owner right now. Are we looking upwards? Do we think bounce back surprise year? Is he somebody that is of value in the fantasy drafts that will come in August?
Well, he is a year older, so that is not going to help his draft stock. Nobody's going to be like, oh, this should be a bounce back year because of the reasons. He's just a year older. So I think his draft stock will be lower than it should be. Right now, we say during this time of year it's a little early to tell, but I actually think this is accurate for Drew Brees. Right now he's going at the back of the 6th round. He's the 8th quarterback taken off the board. Blake Bortles is going ahead of Drew Brees, for instance. Ben Roethlisberger, a lot of guys, obviously 7 guys, are going ahead of Drew Brees. I think Drew Brees should have as good, if not a slightly better year than he had last year.
Here's the interesting thing about last year, and maybe people aren't aware of this that ignore Drew Brees. He had essentially the same completion percentage, almost the same amount of yards, basically the same amount of touchdowns. This is all compared to 2014. He dropped his interceptions from 17 to 11, and he had a better passer rating. There's nothing that said downfall in that stat line.
No.
It was just all of what you said, the Jimmy Graham, the slower start to the season.
The problem last year was that he wasn't as consistent as he usually was. He was a very different home and road quarterback. He had a game where he throws 7 touchdowns. So his total touchdowns, they look all right, but they didn't come the way they usually
The first
came.
6 games, he had a total of 8 touchdowns.
Right.
In 6 games. And so then
terrible.
But then beyond that, so you take 32 minus 6, and the rest of the season he accumulated, he started with that 7 touchdown game you're talking about.
Right.
So very interesting. Let's go ahead and move on to the news.
News and notes from around the league.
All right, we got a breaking news bulletin this morning that Trent Richardson
Who?
is expected to sign with the Baltimore Ravens.
Wow. I can't talk. I can't talk.
Do we assume from this that he is now in stellar shape and is the old Trent Richardson?
No, we do not. We assume that the Ravens are in a bad spot. Or
I mean, now you got Forsett, Javorius Allen, Trent Richardson.
I mean, this
Taliaferro.
You got to wait and see if he's
on the
roster.
I know. It's
because
just funny to. I don't expect to look at my phone and see that.
You don't expect to see Trent Richardson signing anywhere. The fact that he's got a job is, good for him. That's what we'll take from this. Good job, Trent. Thank you for getting yourself a paycheck, and hopefully you are not
very long odds to make the roster, but still funny nonetheless. We've talked about Jimmy Graham. We know the injury was brutal. Seahawks GM John Schneider said it's too early to tell when he will return. This is a type of public statement from Seattle, but this should be a be careful.
Yeah, if you've been listening to the fantasy footballers the last year at all, when we've brought up Jimmy Graham post this injury, it's one where we said next year is not – you are not going to get any semblance of a good tight end, and you might not get a tight end next year. This is a serious injury he had. We've seen other players – it takes 2 years at least usually to bounce back to form.
They're often not the same even after that.
Exactly. So
which is unfortunate
if I was the Seahawks, man, I would without a shadow of a doubt cut him because he is the second highest paid tight end in the league, and he's going to give you almost nothing this year, and then you don't know how he's going to come back after that. So
it's almost a save face thing to keep him on the roster.
Oh,
because of the trade with Max Unger. All right, Chris Johnson says he wants to be back with the Cardinals, specifically with the Cardinals. He's had talks with the team. If they bring him back, what's his role? Because we also heard yesterday Bruce Arians literally came out and said David Johnson's not the best yet, but he has the potential to be the best in history.
Yeah, the best of all time.
That's what he actually said.
Which this truly is the time of year where you don't take coaches seriously. This is combine talk. This is,
every second-year player could handle that type of a compliment, nor would a coach give it to them. Because rookies or young guys, they need to be brought down, not been told what their potential is. So I think it says a lot to the man of David Johnson, to be honest with you, that he's a mature type of player. I mean, that's all the reports that we hear is he's a very mature teammate.
So let me ask you this on the Chris Johnson news then. The Cardinals want Chris Johnson back.
Absolutely.
They would be happy to have him so long as he comes at a good price. Chris Johnson said at this point in his career, he's not chasing the money anymore. Not that he ever was. His words, which is
hilarious.
But that he wants to play for a team that's got a shot, and he wants to come back. So it seems like...
I think he'll be back.
That's what I was going to say. It seems like he's going to be back. So with Chris Johnson back, who was the starter last year, we would presume David Johnson's the starter next year.
He is.
Chris Johnson's the backup.
Yeah.
But how much do you think Chris Johnson will eat into the workload of David Johnson when you saw he was fully capable this year?
Not a lot.
No?
No, I don't think so. I think it could be one of those things where you could get later in games and you could lose some of your David Johnson reps, and I think it's going to be a series here and there to spell David Johnson. But David Johnson represents so much more in the passing game than Chris Johnson does, and so much more explosion.
Could be good news for David Johnson to keep
It
him
honestly could be.
from
It honestly could be.
having to touch the ball 30 times. You don't want him to break down and get hurt. He doesn't do you any good.
He could hit the wall. So just interesting news there. Interesting word from the Combine that the Chargers and Falcons may be in the hunt for Travis Benjamin. 15 more days, 14 more days, whatever it is, to sign him before free agency begins. Do you think Travis Benjamin hits the market? I do not, but if he did, are these destinations that you'd be excited about?
Yeah, I don't think he should hit the market, but he's on the Browns, so that means he might hit the market. I would say both of those would be good landing spots for him. I think we are a little bit too hopeful on Travis Benjamin and thinking he is more than he was when he was pretty much the only target in town. I mean, there were no other receivers.
He'd be a great Julio Jones compliment.
Yes. I think he would be better.
Allen compliment.
I think he would be better in Atlanta than he would in San Diego, because in Atlanta he would be the clear number 2 receiver, whereas if you go to San Diego, he would be one of the group of secondary wide receivers behind Keenan Allen.
Okay, so interesting news about Le'Veon Bell, who when we did a mock, we each individually did one the other day, and you guys both took Antonio Brown, and I took Le'Veon Bell as my number 1 pick, which teaser, show up to the show on YouTube. Make sure you listen to that because we're going to debate this.
Yeah.
And this is why that you took Antonio Brown. They basically, the Steelers GM came out and said they're not going to confirm or commit to the fact that Lev Bell will be back from his MCL PCL for week 1. I think we all anticipate he will be. We hope he will be. But this was something that means maybe we're watching this a lot closer.
Yeah, I mean, we have to monitor it, but I think right now it's not just a hope. I think it's an assumption that he is ready week 1. The timetable says he should be. So, yeah, I mean, you could call it hope, but as of right now, he should be ready week 1. But I wouldn't expect them to come out and necessarily give other teams the inside look into his health.
So a lot of what we do, though, as fantasy owners, as in draft preparation, is we compare players with different risks.
Yeah, for sure. Risk versus reward on every draft pick.
And so this is one in the bad category for Le'Veon Bell.
High reward, a little bit of risk here.
More risk than other guys.
You want when you're drafting at number 1 or number 2.
There are people that are going to come and say the safety of an Adrian Peterson is better than the upside of Le'Veon Bell.
Absolutely.
And I saw Lev
him.
Bell on one a friend of ours. His top 10 had Lev Bell at 9, which is the lowest that I had seen him. So it's interesting how we will evaluate that going forward. Last bit of news, the Chicago Tribune is reporting that there's no way that the Bears let Alshon Jeffrey hit the market, whether it's by franchise tag or re-signing.
Yeah,
just an affirmation of kind of what we thought.
You kind of knew that. Last week when they were saying, oh, there's a chance he could hit the market, that's when teams are just trying to, or, that's his agent trying to drum up interest and saying, give me the money.
All right, so are you ready, Jason?
Oh, man, I was practicing in the shower this morning about this drop. I can't do it.
Mailbag.
Mailbag! Yeah! That's the best I can do. I'm no Mike.
No, you're not, but we appreciate the effort because I'm sure as heck not going to do it. Brandon in Syracuse has a question for us. He said, hey, guys, starting to think about his 2016 keepers. Here's the players in the round that he would keep them in. Lev Bell for a first, Eric Decker for a sixth, Jarvis Landry for a 15th, Dion Lewis for a 16th, David Johnson for a 16th, and yes, he was singing. You can do that one, right?
David Johnson.
All right, just making sure. Jordan Reed for a 16. If you're wondering why I have 3 guys as a 16th rounder, my league takes waiver guys for the last pick. Okay,
and on that note, I will give my obligatory.
Oh, yeah, because you don't like that.
I am super anti that.
Yeah, because you don't like rewarding people for being smart.
I think they were rewarded by picking them up and having them play great, and they weren't rewarded for drafting them. And so when you come to draft season, you're not actually rewarding being smart enough to draft them.
So here's the question. How many keepers does he need?
That is a great question. We don't know because he doesn't tell us.
So let's rank the top
three.
David Johnson is number 1 for a 16th rounder. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree with that.
All right. I will say I would go, man.
I can tell
I'd
you
leave
my
all
three.
the wide receivers on the board, and I would take David Johnson, Dion Lewis, and would you take Jordan Reed over Lev Bell?
I would over Le'Veon Bell.
If you already had David Johnson and Dion Lewis at running back,
That's not a bad idea. Dion Lewis, David Johnson, and Jordan Reed.
and you give up nothing.
And I would give up nothing. I would have my first, but that's not what I would do. I don't blame. That would be my second choice. I would actually prefer to keep Le'Veon Bell, have a great high end, maybe the best
and
player
go
in the
David
league.
Johnson, Jordan Reed
David Johnson, and I would actually go Jarvis Landry
for the 15.
in the 15th.
Okay,
it's pretty much the same.
No, I kind of looked over him, and I shouldn't have. That's basically a free wide receiver 1-2 type of guy. All right, Nate D in Bloomington, Illinois. I can keep one player, Allen Robinson in the 7th, Jordan Reed in the 15th, or Jeremy Langford in the 15th. Thank you. Love the podcast. So this is the debate of upside of Langford, in my opinion, in the 15th
It's
versus
Langford.
the kind of, 7th round value for Allen Robinson is pretty darn nice.
That is very nice. He's going as high as the first round, no lower than the top of the second right now, which we've said on the show is too high for Allen Robinson, but you give him to me in the 7th, and I'm all about it.
I will take Allen Robinson in the 7th here.
I agree. I think he is safer than Langford. You already know what he can do in that role. Langford, there's a lot of hope there. I mean, he could come out and be one of the best running backs next year, but we haven't really seen him in that role. We don't know what they're doing with adding running backs through the draft, through free agency.
Exactly. If Allen Robinson was sitting here for a 2,
Right.
I would think completely different about it.
I agree.
So, I mean, how do you think Langford will step into that role? We saw actually today the Seahawks come out and say, hey, they're not handing the job to Rawls. They're not going to give him that starting job. They're going to bring in guys to compete with him.
Yeah, as
that
they
could
should.
be the exact same attitude that Chicago takes.
As Chicago should, right?
Right.
I mean, you would
Well,
be
as
doing
opposed
your
to
team,
Arizona, who has said David Johnson gets the keys to the castle.
kind of, but we know that they're going to bring in another guy like Chris Johnson to spell him, or through the draft, or through free agency.
But that's different than saying he's going to have to earn his starting job.
Well, David Johnson earned his starting job. Jeremy Langford, and you could argue Thomas Rawls
had more contributing games than David Johnson did.
They both had the same amount of starts, and I would say without their starts, David Johnson contributed more. So I disagree, but I mean, I don't blame them for doing that. There are big question marks with some of these so-called first-round running backs. All this sophomore class, I feel like this first round of running backs, and we'll talk about this in the show after the show, it's just a bunch of sophomore running backs who have so much sexiness and so much risk. And we're just completely overlooking the risk because they're shiny and new and huge upside.
Well, the thing people need to realize is Jeremy Langford looks like the guy who's going to take the job, right?
Yeah.
And Melvin Gordon's coming off a year where he just made you frustrated. But there's no real reason in my mind that Melvin Gordon should be less hyped than Jeremy Langford.
Right.
At this point in time.
Which provides a value then to Gordon, who's going much later in drafts.
Exactly.
Than
So
Langford.
the safety of an Allen Robinson, 22 years old, in this situation, I can't see myself in any league format taking Langford over him right now. If you knew, we're a week from the start of the season and Langford's going to, it's just Kadeem Carey behind him, it doesn't give me a lot of fear.
Right.
So Grimm in Tampa.
He sounds angry.
Florida.
Or sad.
Grimm?
Yeah. Sounds a little grim.
He does. He can keep 3, can keep him forever.
Woo!
No pick penalties. Keepers locked in as the first 3 rounds. Jamaal Charles, Aaron Rodgers, Keenan Allen, Dion Lewis, Devante Parker, and Melvin Gordon.
This is a really tough one.
Because does the keep forever
No, that doesn't
do
factor.
anything for you?
Not really. I mean, you could maybe say that there's more value for a quarterback or a wide receiver over a running back. But we play, one of our league of record is essentially that way to a point, and I never factor it in.
And that's what I was going to bring up philosophically, is that I think that players who overemphasize rules like that destroy their teams.
Yes.
Because here's the thing. You can trade players, okay? Nobody, unless your league is just dead. I mean, if you're in any type of a good league with this type of a rule, you can trade players. If you take the guys that are going to win you this year and next year, don't take a guy just because it's a keep forever rule.
Right.
Like Devante Parker here. I can't pick Devante Parker here.
No way. No way can you pick.
But when you hear keep forever, he's 21 or whatever he is, and he's going to be a superstar, so then I can have the superstar for 10 years.
You want to know the problem with taking Devante Parker here is you've committed to that mindset, which means next year you're committing to that mindset. Next year you're committing to that mindset.
Oh, yeah, then you're buried.
And every year. Okay, so by the time Devante Parker is great, and he's a top guy, the rest of your team still sucks because you're taking guys who are going to be great 3 years from now.
Or he's never great, and then you've taken 3 years of investment and you feel
stuck. Take the best guys. So in this, who are the 3 best guys?
I think, to me,
Jamaal Charles, Keenan Allen.
Yes. And then the third one's a tough decision.
Are you saying Lewis, Rodgers?
I think between Lewis and Gordon, to me.
I would rather
I actually lean Gordon.
Really?
Well, you know what? Pairing him with Keenan Allen.
Lewis guy.
Yeah, pairing him with Keenan Allen here, doing 2 Chargers doesn't make me happy. So I would go Charles, Allen, and
I'm gonna go
Lewis.
I'm gonna go Charles, Allen, and I'm gonna shock you here and go Aaron Rodgers.
Really?
I am, because I think Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd round is enough of a value.
He's not in the 3rd. You might as well say he's in the 1st.
All right. I mean,
no, I get it.
I see what you're saying, but you got 3 players.
Then Keenan Allen's your 2nd round pick.
Yeah.
You're fine with that.
More than Dion Lewis. I mean,
so Lewis in the 3rd, you're taking Aaron Rodgers in the 3rd over Dion Lewis in the 3rd.
Oof.
That's the point.
No way.
I think you got
undone.
No way.
I got undone.
You were
there.
undone.
No way would if Dion Lewis is there and Aaron Rodgers is there.
Charles, Allen, Lewis.
There you go. We're in agreement.
All right. Jim in Ma. That's short for Massachusetts. Yeah.
We're educated here.
I have the number 1 pick in a dynasty league. What wide receiver could I get back in a trade for it? And what kind of player could I send with it to get Hopkins?
Wow.
Also, is it better to trade now or after the draft? These are our least favorite questions in a way. Okay.
Well, they're
part
just
of
so
that question
open.
is good, but when you say something to us, just public service announcement for questions. We love your questions. We answer them on Twitter at the FF Ballers. We answer them on YouTube. We answer them on the website. Submit a question. We love your questions, but we don't know the ins and outs of every team in your league. And so, an open-ended question that says,
"Who should I trade
what wide
for?
receiver could I get back for it?" Well, I don't know. That's my answer to that question.
The truth is, we don't know. We can give you ballpark guesses. I love the second part of his question, though. Is it better to trade now or after the draft? And the truth is, it's always going to be better to trade after the draft, because that's when guys start getting publicity. That's when everybody is being talked about more. The guy that gets drafted by Team X who looks like the best position. I mean, every year there's somebody who is in a position, they're drafted and they look like they're going to be the bell cow running back, or they're going to be, they went to a good quarterback team as one of the top wide receivers, something like that, and that gives that number 1 pick more value. Right now, there's just so many question marks.
I will agree with you, mostly because of a situation that always happens in the draft where, the Falcons trade all their picks to get Julio Jones, and you understand at that point the investment they make on a certain player.
Right.
And I think that weighs it. I think that there are times, where you can take advantage of hype when a certain player's coming out and they're just the bar none number 1 type of guy. I think it's can be irrelevant at that point, but I agree with you for the most part. In terms of Hopkins, what could you trade for it to get Hopkins?
With that number 1 pick, what caliber wide receiver do you need to pair with the number 1 pick in a dynasty league draft to get Hopkins?
Well, your point, your goal here is to win a trade, not to necessarily figure out
even value.
Yeah. So I wouldn't do a whole lot there. I'm not going to send another 1 and my number 1. So, right. Maybe somebody in the Eric Decker category. I'd send Eric Decker and the number 1 dynasty,
or like
Hopkins,
a Larry Fitzgerald.
Maybe.
It doesn't have as much value in a dynasty.
Yeah, look for somebody in that. I wouldn't do a lot for that.
No.
So let's move on here to John in Chicago. He says, "Hey guys, love the show. I was wondering if you could go over draft tiers for players and come up with your own that we could use for our drafts."
Absolutely.
Can't wait to listen to on Tuesday and Thursday. Can't wait to get back to 5 days a week. And he ends the question with #FootClan title. So congratulations, John, on your title.
Yes, we love bringing people championships. So will we go over draft tiers for players? Yes, I will explain tiers now. We don't have our tiers made yet because we don't really go in depth on our rankings until after the NFL draft and a little bit of free agency. It would just be foolish. We would blow everything up again. But the way that draft tiers, which we will be getting to in specific, are going to work is essentially you take the guys that you think are like, let's look at tight ends. Tight ends to me are the easiest. Tight ends or quarterbacks. They're really easy to see. You look and you go, okay, you got one tier in Gronk. He is the clear-cut number one tight end. He is by himself. Now, some people are maybe squeezing Jordan Reed into that category. You know,
well, that's up to you when you determine your
right when
tiers,
you determine your tiers. For me, I would be like Gronk is his own tier. Then in that next tier, there's those
Jordan Reed, Greg Olsen,
Jordan Reed. Those two are for sure there. Maybe I would put a Travis Kelce or a Tyler Eifert near there. I would probably put them in the next tier.
Yeah.
And so you go down the list and you tier guys off, and you're going to find major breaking points. You're going to find like, okay, I got little tiers here, but this is the big tier. Like after these first four guys, the rest is all about the same. And so you group guys together where you go, they're about the same, even though this guy's drafted higher or lower. So I'm not going to, if I'm in a draft.
We just went through this.
Yeah, we just went through this on the show where if you're in our last mock draft show, if you didn't listen to that, go listen to it.
On Tuesday.
Yeah. So if you, if you're in a draft where you're at a spot and you look at your list and you need X position, but there's a lot of guys in the group that you're really looking at, then
go
don't
somewhere
go.
else.
Yeah, go somewhere else.
We were facing the 11th round decision on Julius Thomas.
Yeah,
somewhere around there. He was the last guy that we actually considered kind of an upgrade over the pack.
Right.
So we took him.
There you go.
All right, Big Daddy Beef Johnson in New York City.
New York City.
You got to do that with Big Daddy Beef Johnson.
Oh, yeah.
Which one of you guys would win in a professional wrestling match? Here's the rules. He adds in the details. Cheating is allowed, i.e. folding chair under the ring, brass knuckles in the turnbuckle, confusing the referee.
Well, I was going to go me at first, but now
because of your former jiu-jitsu training?
Because of my jiu-jitsu training. But now I'm definitely going me because I will combine jiu-jitsu with whatever it takes.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Seinfeld episode where Jerry asks Elaine who would win between Jerry and George, and she says George because he'd fight dirty, and he said he'd do, he'll pull hair, groin stuff.
Oh yeah,
all sorts of things. You'll do whatever it takes to win.
I'll speed bag on the
if
bag.
You don't, insight into the soul of Jason Moore, he likes to win.
Yeah,
and he never feels guilty about how that happens as long as at the end he has won.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
Mostly.
I mean,
you've grown a small conscience.
Yeah, well, I consider myself, a moral fella. But in competition, when we're competing and we're all in the same game together,
#moral fella.
I'm going to win. Is essentially what I aim to do.
Yes. All right, Ernie in Winnipeg, and just judge this real quick. Mike and I.
Oh, that's
Mike
great
wins probably.
I don't know. I mean, Mike has a little bit of submission wrestling training, but that very little. You have the reach on him, and if I had to,
you've always said
I think
that I'd beat you in a boxing match.
Yes, in a boxing only match,
because
I think you would win.
My reach.
You've got the reach. You're an athletic guy, and you're also a competitor, so I'm going to take you. Sorry, Mike. Mike's not here. I take Andy.
I feel really good right now. Ernie in Winnipeg.
Bonjour.
In a keeper league where I can only keep 2 dudes.
No girls. You can't keep any of the ladies.
Nope. I have Gronk, Hopkins, Charles, and Olsen.
This is easy.
League has a flex position open to receivers, running backs, and tight ends. So, like a normal flex.
I would go Gronk and Hopkins. I see both of those guys as first-round type
You would.
caliber. Yeah, I mean, Jamaal Charles is definitely in the equation. But to me, there's still a lot of question mark there with a guy coming off of major
Would you be super
injury.
afraid to have Gronk and Charles with the injury histories?
Yeah, you go.
I mean, Hopkins is so young, and Charles and Gronk have both had major knee injuries multiple times.
Right.
Both of them.
So take Hopkins,
So
and
just
then whether
hedge
you
your
want
bet.
Gronk or whether you want Charles. And some of that in these
That's what I would
leagues,
do too. I would have one knee injury risk on that team.
Right. Some of these keeper league decisions aren't as straightforward as Andy and I make them because you know your league and you know who's keeping who. And so if all the running backs are kept, then yeah, keep Jamaal Charles because you're going to just screw yourself if your number one running back is essentially a number, not even an RB1. You got to factor those type of decisions in.
Absolutely. So Mike in New York City.
New York City?
Is DeAndre Hopkins worth keeping for a third-round pick?
Yes, as just covered, absolutely.
It is the DeAndre Hopkins hour. I saw him on that same board from one of our colleagues in the industry that had Lev Bell at number 9. DeAndre Hopkins was number 5.
That's higher than I would put him, but I mean, what do you not love about a guy who gets as many targets? And we've talked before.
118th in yards after the catch.
Yeah, that
which can
that
only
could be
get better.
improved.
Can only get better.
Yeah, and he's a hard worker. We saw that on Hard Knocks last year. His practice looks like he's in a game. He's running full as hard as he can, breaking, trying to get better. So when you've got work ethic with talent.
In the beginning of Larry Fitzgerald's career, and I could be wrong if you looked up the stats, so I'm going to leave.
So don't look up the stats.
I'm leaving. Yeah, don't look it up. That was something he really worked on. He was a hands size guy, but his run after the catch wasn't there, and that's something that you
got great at.
That's something you can improve at.
Absolutely.
So, and we know he wants to. So, Chris in Thunder Bay, and this is basically the same question that Moyes in Dallas has. So, these are both kind of 2 quarterback league questions. But he says, thanks for all the advice all season. Enjoyed the shenanigans. But he did not make the playoffs in his 2 leagues of records, which are both 2 quarterback leagues. He says, we tend to focus on the single quarterback leagues, but wants to pick our brains about our draft theory for 2 quarterback leagues.
Totally different. 100% different.
He said streaming was not an option during the season as he waited on quarterback with the Tannehill-Bradford-Cutler combo. That might be why he didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Is it better to go 2 quality early, one early and one later? Any input would be greatly appreciated. And that's basically the same question that we got in from Moyes in Dallas.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people.
What is the streaming? Because we talk streaming quarterbacks, so then people try to apply that to their 2 quarterback leagues.
Yeah, and you're not going to be able to stream in 2 quarterback leagues very well because more teams
12-team league, 2 to 3 quarterbacks per team. They're almost all taken.
Oh, yeah, almost 3 quarterbacks for every team. I mean, if you have to start 2, you normally want somebody that you can rotate with. So streaming off the waiver wire is going to be almost impossible.
However, that does not mean you cannot get value.
Absolutely. No, it does not mean you can't get value. What I would do if I'm in a 2 quarterback league is I look at the quarterback position very similar to the running back position. Now you start 2 like you usually do at running back, and when you double that pool essentially in a 12-team league and you're starting 24 quarterbacks, that's about where you get to garbage. You get to guys that aren't putting up good fantasy games. And so the spread between the first and last place, which isn't usually that big in quarterbacks, becomes pretty big. So what I would do is I like to have in a 2 quarterback league 1 early and then 1 value. So I'm going to try to get a guy that I think.
So you're talking the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, absolutely.
First 3 rounds,
first
you take
3
one
rounds,
big
I'm taking 1 big quarterback,
and then
I wait and find the best value based on my draft tiers for the second.
That's what I do as well. Yeah, and I think that's the philosophy we've talked about before. Where when you're in that situation, streaming's not going to be as easy. It doesn't mean you're not going to be able to do it at all, but it's less likely.
Yeah, you'll have waiver injuries and things like that make waiver wire important for quarterback through the year. But you cannot use our wait to the 10th round to get your first quarterback theory to any success in a 2 quarterback league. Won't work.
Yeah, I agree. So and every year there's a lot of value. It's just a matter of paying attention to which guys. We talked about Brees, potential to drop. We like Phillip Rivers. There's a lot of guys like that just end up later in drafts. Last year was
Dalton.
Carson Palmer. It was Derek Carr. It was Bortles. Those guys. All right, so let's move on here to a question from Gridiron Gangsters in Santa Rosa, California. I guess there's a bunch of gangsters that have fantasy questions.
Yeah, on the gridiron.
On the gridiron. I'm in a 4-keeper league with an auction draft at $380 cap. Can't decide on my 3rd and 4th keeper, and here
$380 cap. Where did
don't
you
know
get
why.
that number?
Don't know why.
Just pulled out of.
Yeah, 380,
Okay.
man.
Just want to be
Can't
unique.
decide on my third and fourth keeper. Here are my choices. Antonio Brown for $105.
I got to wrap my brain around this. So normally an
I'll
auction
help
budget
you.
is
I'll help you.
$200.
That would be 27% of his budget.
Okay.
Blake Bortles for 20. Your guy, Latavius Murray for 20. Jordan Reed for 20. Help me pick 2.5-point PPR. That is so much money to spend on Antonio Brown.
That is a lot of
But
money.
I would probably do it.
So that would be spending more than $50.
Here's the
in a
problem.
usual-
If this is his third and fourth keeper, does he have two other keepers we don't know about then that take up that 380? Because if you had two other big keepers for big money,
Right, that makes a difference.
Then
If
the
you've
Antonio
already
Brown
spent a
decision's
lot
tough.
of money, don't. But I'm guessing here that if he's already picked those other two guys, they were easier decisions, meaning they probably weren't super expensive. In which case, if they're not expensive, I lean with you. I would go Antonio
I'd go Brown and Murray.
Yeah, I would go Brown and Murray. If you already have a lot of money wrapped up in your other two keepers, then I would go Murray and Reed.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. I would not keep Bortles.
No,
That's for sure.
unless two quarterback.
Yeah. Theo Davis in Vermont has a question about commishing his league, settling score disputes. Says he's the commissioner, and they have a dispute, or they had a dispute about a tie last year, which he solved by changing scoring to decimals.
Which is great. Every league should have decimal scoring.
What is your opinion on ties and how to resolve them? Well, I think you did the right thing there. If
Yeah.
you still have a decimal tie, most leagues that we're in go to bench points.
Bench first. So
It's almost impossible to
I know.
have a
A tie-
tie in decimals in the regular and then a tie on your bench in decimals.
Yeah.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not even going to address it.
There you go.
So I would do bench points as the secondary measure, but decimals should solve it. I'll tell you this, ever since we switched to decimals in our league of record, we've had 0 ties.
That is entirely not true.
Really?
Yeah.
We had one?
Yep.
Just one, though, right?
I think so.
Okay.
But it is rare.
So, and then it was solved by bench points.
Yeah.
So it just makes it easier and decimals, just speaking to league formats, I like them a lot because they get you a little bit more connected to what's taking place on the field. You know, everything that happens, you're not waiting for thresholds to get broken. You get a result. You know, your guy catches a 7-yard pass. You get 0.7 points.
Right.
I mean, you get
what you
instant-
should get. You get what
instant
you deserve for it.
gratification from that. So it's a lot more fun in that regard. So, again, we're going to debate the merits of Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell here soon in the show after the show.
I cannot wait to
No.
make the case.
I don't know why we didn't pick something more controversial that Mike would disagree with, that he can't voice himself.
Yeah.
on,
Well, that's
but
yeah.
that's okay.
Mano
So
y mano.
yeah, exactly. So make sure that you follow us on Twitter at the FF Ballers. If you don't know, we're going to be recording all off season long and into the draft season. We've got a lot of things that, as a show, you know, we do this all day long, every day. We're trying to make strides in making our video show better, in making the website better.
With some really cool stuff coming. Really cool.
Yeah. So, and so we thank you for your support. We thank everybody at jointhefoot.com for supporting the podcast. We are an independent podcast, and so it means a lot to have you support this show.
We will
and everything
also
we're doing.
be recording today our weekly show for our exclusive show over on jointhefoot.com. So that will go up later today for all of our supporters.
Yeah, so stay tuned for the show after the show. Thank you for listening to the two-man band and Jason's beautiful singing. And we will be back here next Tuesday with the quiz show. You don't want to miss that. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Can't wait.
See ya!
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Fantasy Footballers Podcast. Join our fantasy football community on jointhefoot.com and follow us on Twitter at the FF Ballers.